Good day everyone, I'm Shela Mae Sentillas from BSTM 1101. In this video, I'm going to discuss hazard and risk and how to eliminate those two in tourism and hospitality industry. But before that, let me show to you my presentation using infographics. Before I start, let me share to you what is tourism and hospitality industry. They are closely connected to each other, but there are some differences we need to know. Hospitality industry is a broad field and refers to the variety of businesses and services linked with leisure and customer satisfaction. The aspect of hospitality industry focuses on the ideas of luxury, amenities, enjoyment, experiences, as opposed to catering for necessities and essential. While tourism industry is concerned with the services of the people who traveled away from their usual residence. Those two industries might encounter hazard and risk, and it's important to be aware what is hazard and risk and how to eliminate those two. So without further ado, let's get started.
Risk management as applied to safety, security, and sanitation. Hazard and risk in hospitality industry. So what is hazard? Hazard is something that can cause harm. Example of this is electricity, chemicals, working up a ladder, noise, a keyboard, a bully at work, stress, etc. While a risk is the chance, maybe high or a low, that any hazard will actually cause somebody harm. To understand better, I'll give you an example. As you can see in the picture, it shows that working alone away from your office can be a hazard. The risk of personal danger may be high. Electric cabling is a hazard. If it has snag on a sharp object, the exposed wiring places in its high risk category. In the hospitality industry, there's the usual suspect in terms of workplace hazard and risk that are generic to our business. These hazards are found in most hospitality venues, including hotels. They basically need to be addressed to ensure we reduce the risk of injury to employees. So, there are some common hazard and risks in hospitality industry. First is manual handling. 50% of all injuries in the hotel sector are incurred while carrying out some sort of manual handling related task. They generally musculoskeletal type injuries like trauma or pain to your back, knees, elbows, muscle tears, contusions, and etc. The nature of repetitive work in our industry, like moving kegs or carrying cartons, making beds or carrying luggage, can lead to muscle strain directly or over a period of time. Next is slips, trips, and falls. This is an occupational hazard. To use the terminology, however, steps can be taken to reduce the risk of water pooling or condensation, notwithstanding our subtropical climate playing a part. There are some practical measures to prevent slips, trips, and falls. First is poor housekeeping practices where pedestrian thoroughfares are clogged with flotsam and jetsam are common back of house. Find somewhere else to store it. Next is ensure all staff wear enclosed, non-slip footwear for the task. Third, if practical for your venue, slip-resistant high-grade vinyl laid behind the bar is recommended solution. Fourth, clean up spills as soon as is practicable. Fifth, install good lighting, especially on stairs or pedestrian areas that are uneven, so people can see ahead clearly. Next, we have here hazardous chemicals. Most hazardous chemicals used in a hotel context are cleaning agents. The kitchen will generally use heavy-duty oven and grill cleaner, although there has been a tendency for venues to change to more environmentally friendly products over recent years. So there are some tips when using or handling chemicals. First, use least hazardous chemicals for the job. Second, use personal protective equipment. Third, ensure that safety data sheets are available where hazardous chemicals are stored and used. Fourth, store chemicals safely and securely when not in use. And last, do not store chemicals in food and or drink containers and make sure they are correctly labeled. Next, burns, scalds, and cuts. There are the obvious results of hazards that are found in hotel kitchens. Kitchen staff can become blazed when it comes to safety practices. In many cases, it's not good to wear stainless steel, mesh, hand gloves, or gauntlets to prevent cuts. My advice is to strictly enforce safety practices in the kitchen to prevent your staff getting injured. So now, we have here biological hazards. Staff can be exposed to blood and other body fluids through needle stick and other sharp injuries. They may accidentally get in contact with used needles between bed sheets, under beds, in garbage containers, and the hidden washrooms. These items could be contaminated with blood and body fluids infected with microorganisms that can cause diseases. These are known as bloodborne pathogens. The bloodborne pathogens of most concern are the human immunodeficiency virus and the hepatitis B and C viruses. So, to prevent biological hazards and those microorganisms, wash your hands frequently, never handle broken glass, don't compress garbage, hold garbage bags away from the body, contaminated laundry should be appropriately identified, and always discard the gloves after use or after a contamination. The last common hazard in hospitality industry is workplace violence. Workplace violence is a situation in which a person is abused, threatened, intimidated, or assaulted in his or her employment. Workplace violence includes threatening behavior, verbal or written threats, harassment, verbal abuse, and physical attacks. Take note, they are just example or a common hazards in tourism and hospitality industry. Eliminating risk and hazard in hospitality industry. There was a statement stated to identify what hazard exists in a workplace and how likely to these hazards are to cause harm. Employers must carry out risk assessments. But what is risk assessment? In the travel, restaurant, and lodging industry, also known as hospitality, risk management involves keeping abreast of rapid and often dramatic change, especially as new technologies emerge. Potential risks in the hospitality industry include innovation, safety issues, natural disasters, and reputational risk. There are 5 steps to risk assessments. Step 1. Identify hazards. Anything that may cause harm. Employers have a duty to assess the health and safety risks faced by workers. Your employer must systematically change and check for possible physical, mental, chemical, and biological hazards. This is one common classification of hazards. What is physical hazards? Physical hazards, example of this is lifting, awkward postures, slips and trips, noise, dust, machinery, computer equipment, and etc. Mental hazard, excess workload, long hours, working with high-need clients, bullying, and etc. It also called psychosocial hazards, affecting mental health and occurring within working relationship. Next, what is chemical hazard? Example of this is asbestos, cleaning fluids, aerosols, and etc. And last, what is biological hazards? It includes tuberculosis, hepatitis, and other infectious disease faced by healthcare and workers, as what I said earlier. Step 2. Design who may be harmed and how. Identifying who is at risk with their organization's own fault, and part-time employees. Employers must also assess risk faced by agency and contract staff, visitors, clients, and other members of the public on their premises. Employees must review work routines in all the different locations and situations where their staff are employed. Step 3. Assess the risk and take action. This means employer must consider how likely it is that each hazard could cause harm. This will determine whether or not employer should reduce the level of risk. Even after all precautions have been taken, some risk usually remains. Employees must decide for each remaining hazard whether the risk remain high, medium, or low. Step 4. Make a record of the findings. Employees with 5 or more staff are required to record in writing in the main findings of the risk assessment. This record should include details of many hazards noted in the risk assessment and action taken to reduce or eliminate risk. This record provides proof that the assessment was carried out and is used as the basis for a later review of working practices. The risk assessment is a working document. You should be able to read it and it should not be locked away in a cupboard. Step 5. Review the risk assessment. A risk assessment must be kept under review in order to ensure that agreed safe working practices continue to be applied and take account of any new working practices, new machinery, or more demanding work targets. Aside from the tips I've stated, I searched some ways to control a hazard. First is elimination. Remove the hazard from the workplace or substitute or replace hazardous materials or machines with less hazardous ones. Second, engineering controls. It includes designs or modification to plants, equipment, ventilation system, and processes that reduce the source of exposure. Third is administrative controls. Controls that alter the way the work is done, including timing of work, policies, and other rules and work practices, such as standards and operating procedures, including training, housekeeping, and equipment maintenance and personal hygiene practices. The last one is personal protective equipment. Equipment worn by individuals to reduce exposure such as contact with chemicals or exposure to noise. And on the last part of my presentation, it stated, the stakeholders of establishment in tourism and hospitality help them to prevent the problems and various accidents if they apply proper method and ways of eliminating risk and hazard.
That ends my presentation. I hope you learned something and it will help you for future purposes. Thank you and God bless!